This podcast was recorded on the ancestral lands on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and the Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation.
This is Humans on Rights, a podcast advocating for the education of human rights. Here's your host, Stuart Murray.
Artificial intelligence, AI, is changing the world before our eyes. We now carry systems powered by AI in our pockets, wear them on our wrists. Vehicles in the market can now drive themselves. Diagnostic systems determine what is ailing us, and risk assessment algorithms increasingly decide whether we are jailed or set free after being charged with a crime. The promise of AI to improve our lives is enormous. AI-based systems are already outperforming medical specialists in diagnosing certain diseases, while the use of AI in the financial system is expanding access to credit to borrowers that were once passed by. Automated hiring systems promise to evaluate job candidates on the basis of their bona fide qualifications rather than on qualities such as age or appearance that often lead human decision makers astray. AI promises to allow institutions to do more while spending less, with concomitant benefits for the availability and accessibility of all kinds of services. Yet AI also has downsides that dampen its considerable promise. Foremost among these is the AI systems depend on the generation, collection, storage, analysis, and the use of vast quantities of data, with corresponding impacts on the right to privacy. AI techniques can be used to discover some of our most intimate secrets by drawing profound correlations out of seemingly innocuous bits of data. Well, that's a bit of an introduction, but more to the point, I'm joined by somebody who has a very, very interesting background on AI. My guest is Cody Chomiak. He's the Vice President of Marketing for Travel Manitoba. And Cody is an industry leader in blending marketing innovation with emerging technologies. As Vice President of Marketing for Travel Manitoba, he develops strategies that position Manitoba as a premier destination on the global stage. Now, beyond his role in destination marketing, Cody serves on the board of Destinations International and is an instructor in the Certified Destination Management Executive Program, also known as CDME. And that shapes the future of tourism leadership. Cody is also a recognized voice in the field of artificial intelligence, speaking across Canada and the United States about AI's impact on tourism and marketing. As a member of Destination Canada's 10X group, he collaborates with AI thought leaders to explore cutting-edge advancements and ethical considerations within the industry. His insights and experience provide a unique perspective at the intersection of AI, marketing, and tourism. Cody, before we get into this conversation, I just wanted to sort of throw this comment by world-renowned English theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking, who said AI is likely to be either the best or the worst thing to happen to humanity. All of that said, Cody Chomiak, welcome to Humans on Rights.
Thank you so much for having me. And I think that is a fantastic quote to set the stage and start our conversation. I think the answer to that question, we will all find out. I'm hoping and gunning for the former and not the latter, the positive and not the negative. I think we're going to see a combination of both. I think what is happening with AI that is different from any other technology that's out there is it's affecting all of us, every sector, and every person on this planet. So thought leaders have compared artificial intelligence to electricity. And we can't think of artificial intelligence as adopting tech. This isn't learning a new CRM system. This is literally electricity that's going to be in absolutely everything that we do. So we're at a fundamental transformation as a human species of how we are changing our behaviors, how we're interacting with each other, and how we're interacting now with artificial intelligence, with machines, and how they become more human-like, but also more influential in what runs everything around the globe.
So, Cody, one of the challenges when you talk about artificial intelligence or when you read about it, there are tons of benefits, and we can talk about those benefits. But can you teach artificial intelligence to understand the difference between kindness And being rude.
100% yes, you can. Artificial intelligence is extremely good at analyzing just massive amounts of data and making patterns, identifying interesting outcomes, and using that to learn and actually, but it's all on how artificial intelligence is prompted. And so the challenge that we have is that AI, everybody thinks of, or at least I think of, because I'm a sci-fi nerd, I think of Terminator 2 and Skynet, right? And this, or the Matrix. AI really doesn't have an agenda. It doesn't have an emotion in terms of racism or, fear or hatred. That's the challenge, is that it is completely neutral, but it is relying on solely the ecosystem that it is learning on. And so when you look at, for example, Kodak cameras, when Kodak cameras were invented, they were calibrated to actually photograph light-skinned people. And it was not dark-skinned or Black people that worked with Kodak cameras to change the calibration. It was actually the chocolate companies. And they said, we want to better photograph milk and dark chocolate. So what is important to understand is we've had this inherent bias in our world, in our society, in our history. And that inherent bias has followed us along the way. And it's been baked into all of these systems, and technology is one of them. The difference is that we are on this inflection point now where we're taking all of these biases and giving it to a technology like artificial intelligence, but giving it the autonomy to make those decisions and actually carry out decisions. And that's where it's a very scary intersection right now, because there's an amazing thought leader in the space, Dr. Joy Buolamwini. She has a book called Unmasking AI. And she was really one of the first individuals to uncover this bias. And she was working with a project in her education for a thesis, and it was a facial recognition piece with a mirror. And so she was using a lot of code that was already out in the marketplace, and it wasn't recognizing her face. And then she drew a smiley face on the palm of her hand, and she dragged it across the camera, and it tracked it. And she had a Halloween mask on, like she at the side of her desk. She put that mask on, and it recognized the mask, but it didn't recognize her face. And so what she uncovered is we have a technology that's very much reliant on facial recognition in so many systems, right? Facial recognition in airports, facial recognition for weapons, autonomous driving, even facial recognition to unlock the door of an apartment to let you in. But if that technology doesn't recognize all humans as human, that's a huge issue. And so she was able to alert, Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, all of these major tech giants. Ironically, Microsoft, they invited her in. Amazon actually threatened to sue her. So it's a very tumultuous landscape that we're navigating right now as you're dealing with world governments, this fast evolving technology. And it's so rapidly evolving, and the consequences are so far wide reaching that we can't even understand the impacts. And, when you look at transformation over time, it took, 10 years for Netflix to get 100 million users. It took 2 months for ChatGPT to reach 100 million users. And very appropriately on this podcast, we're approaching at the time of this taping, a 2-year anniversary since ChatGPT has been released. So when you're looking at transformation and over humankind, this is the fastest transformational landscape that is impacting every sector, every facet of our society. And so to understand the far-reaching impacts, we don't even know what that's going to do. I now put myself to sleep at night saying we have thought leaders in this space who are identifying this work. I think we're starting to see governments waking up. We're seeing groups of individuals that are organizing and putting together policies in place to help navigate this. But I think what's exciting is the opportunity we have to leverage artificial intelligence for good. And so what I champion is ethical artificial intelligence. And the people who are scared about what's happening, I say we should all be scared. I'm right there with you. I'm trying to jump into the ring to see, is there an opportunity for me to learn about it, to understand what the pitfalls are, but maybe have a help and a role in helping to shape at least how our organization is using it, how our industry is using it, and hopefully how we can educate others and our governments on how to properly use it.
The 2 years is just stunning, right? When you think about how new it is, yet how it's become very much a part of everyday life. And I love your enthusiasm. I love the fact that, you're so positive, and I'm with you. I hope that this thing becomes such an incredible benefit to society on so many levels that we'll simply look back and go, where was it? How come we didn't go sooner? Having said all that, Cody, if artificial intelligence is baked by basically the information that's fed into it, there will be those that will want to feed information that is not necessarily accurate for reasons that may impact their business or may impact their opportunity. Or, for example, this isn't a conversation or a podcast about politics, but for example, there could be some things that get brought forward. And so if somebody's relying on the artificial intelligence banner to get them the information, they're not necessarily guaranteed that what they're getting is accurate.
I completely agree. I think the positive spin to that slant is that this isn't new. So when you look at the internet and the early days of the internet, search engine optimization was a really easy way for people to game the system so that their web page and their website would show up at the very top of all of these different searches. And they were able to some large extent, in many cases, manipulate when their site would show up, and also manipulate the information that's being shared. And it's the same with these large language models, like a ChatGPT or a Claude, or there's Perplexity AI. There's a ton of different tools out there. I think the difference is, and my hope is that these tools are being trained on massive amounts of data. And as we go forward in time, what we need to do is make sure that we're working with the engineers of these large language models to bake in guardrails so that it's fact checking these biases, and it's also fact checking the information to make sure that it's serving up information that's accurate. Now, the challenge to that piece, we're entering an age of misinformation, of disinformation, and of deep fakes. And it has never been easier to create artificial information at a scale of which we have never seen before. And it isn't just in politics or in major rings. There was a principal who was investigated because of an audio tape that came out about the principal saying slanderous and racist things. But when that investigation actually went through, it was uncovered that the gym teacher used generative AI to create a fake audio recording of that principal as a way to get the principal out, because the principal was actually investigating the gym teacher for a number of fraud and allegations within the school. And why I bring that up is this isn't a sophisticated government or super PAC. This isn't a Fortune 500 company. This isn't even, a computer hacker. This is a gym teacher who had access to these tools and was able to create something in real time that was potentially disruptive and destructive to an individual's career and life. Now, it ended up in a good news story in the end, but I think that's what's going to happen is we are at an age now where we need to be smarter than ever. And that's why it's so important to educate yourself in what is happening in AI, the downfalls and pitfalls, what AI is not good at, what AI is good at, and also how you can protect yourself from misinformation. It's important that we're using these large language models, ChatGPT and other, to ask for different things, but it's always important to double check your sources.
So on that basis, Cody, if you think about people that, just say they went on the internet and they put something in and the information comes back is not necessarily accurate, but, they're not going to go to that next level. They just sort of take it verbatim that that's what it is, and they go down their path, and that's how they've been educated on that specific issue. How might somebody start to educate themselves on learning to ensure that they can start to trust what it is that's coming or what they're reading? What steps might they take to do that?
I would say first and foremost, it's understanding how these large language models work. And there are some great tutorials that are out there. One thought leader that we've worked with Destination Canada is called Connor Grennan, and he leads the NYU Stern School of Business AI program. He has an amazing quick start guide that will walk you through how to actually do a prompt. What would you ask? How would you double check these things? How do these large language models work? It's really important for people to understand that AI and large language models specifically is not Google. It's not a replacement for search. It's not a replacement for research, but it's so much more than that. So understanding that duality is very important. If I'm doing a research paper and I need to cite sources, I might start with a ChatGPT, but I'm going to go and check each and every one of those sources on the internet to make sure that it's accurate. Now, that's very different in a use case than me working with ChatGPT to say, I've got a colleague of mine I need to provide feedback for, and I want to make sure that the feedback I provide is thoughtful and not emotionally charged. So I'm going to use ChatGPT to say, here's what I'm dealing with. Here's what I'm unhappy with. Can you help me word this in such a way that I can have a really appropriate conversation that's thoughtful? That, to me, is one of the best use cases of artificial intelligence that you can use. Or loading up a job description that you're hiring for and say, hey, we're in the tourism space. We're looking at this new position for Francophone tourism marketing. Do you know are there any blind spots in the job description? Are there ways that we can enhance it, change it? The thought leadership that this LLM will come back with is staggering. So I think when you understand how these tools can enhance your everyday, it is literally like having a coworker that sits right beside you that you can talk to about anything, and it helps you to provide advice. What it's not is a factual, 100% correct piece, which is why, Google famously rolled out their Google Gemini, and people were asking, how do I get my daily minerals? And the LLM was spitting back, you should eat rocks every day, because it was sourcing a thread on Reddit and it didn't understand, so I always say AI is a co-pilot, not an autopilot. And so when you can understand the distinction, I can still use it. I can use it as a powerful brainstorming tool. I can use it to say, pull out the themes and the main takeaways from these meeting notes. I can go and say to it, what did Fran say that I need to do in the next meeting? I can say to it, I'm stressed out today. Or, hey, I've got these 5 things in my refrigerator. What can I make for dinner? Like, there's so many different ways to use it that are not radical or are not putting people's rights or groups at risk.
Right. So you use the acronym LLM.
Yes, large language model. So large language models, for those that don't know, artificial intelligence has been around for 40 plus years. So it is not new. The difference is that we had analytical intelligence and then generative artificial intelligence. And generative artificial intelligence is what is happening right now that we're hearing about. So that's the ChatGPTs. That's these large language models. And what that is what they do is they pour over vast amounts of data, and they're able to use machine learning to then compile this information and generate new content in the form of a query as a response to a prompt. So when I say a large language model, I'm talking about ChatGPT, Perplexity AI, Claude, Gemini. There's quite a few out there. And those are systems where you type in and ask, and then you get back a phrase, or it helps you with a task. Apple Intelligence rolled out with their enhanced Siri, so she's actually, much more useful now. That's using ChatGPT's LLM or large language model. So that's what I mean when I'm saying those tools, and those are the tools that consumers are most familiar with. Analytical AI has been around. The easiest example is when you're on Google Maps and it gives you 3 different routes and it says, this is the shortest route based on traffic. That's analytical AI, right? So it's pouring over that information and it's giving you results in real time, but it's not inherently creating a product. And generative AI creates images, videos, audio, text, all sorts of things, voice, you name it.
So you speak a lot about artificial intelligence, both in Canada and the United States. In 2 years, what would be one or two things that you would say, here's what we're finding is trending that is really particularly building on what you're talking about, the benefits of artificial intelligence. You're seeing things that are trending in a way that are saying, I know this is for good. I know this is going to make a difference.
Oh, absolutely. There's so many amazing applications. I think when you look at the area of enhanced accessibility and inclusion, I was at the TED event in April of earlier this year, and there was a gentleman from Japan who was speaking into the microphone in Mandarin. And in the speakers of the auditorium, it was translating it in his voice in English, even with an accent. So he would tell a joke, and a half a second later, we would all hear it in English. So when you're looking at, especially in travel and human connections, language is one of the biggest barriers. And AI is helping to give real time translation to break down those barriers. Now, someone can ask a question in their first language that can be parroted out to a multitude of other languages to the person that you're speaking to. You can now engage actively in conversations. When you're looking at inclusivity, technology like being able to use voice recordings and tell people with visual impairments what's happening on the screen, what's even happening in front of them. With Google Glasses, you can have a visually impaired person now hold up a sign and say, what does this sign say? And the glasses will read it to them. They will be able to navigate and wayfind throughout the city. There's even now with Elon Musk's new brain implant, there's a gentleman that has paralysis that's able to control a computer with his mind and play a video game as effectively as before he had the mobile impairedness. So that's, I think, one of the most exciting applications that I'm seeing, I would say broadly. I would say advancements in healthcare would be the second piece. We were able to unlock all 200 million protein structures in 1 year using AI. And we were not able to get anywhere near that in the history of medical science. Those protein structures are the makeup of all human life. And so that's been given over to the broader medical community. So we are on the cusp of an AI revolution that is going to allow for a much more personalized healthcare. We're going to be seeing cures for diseases. We're going to be seeing more information and knowledge sharing on a one-to-one basis. I can now have an artificial intelligence assistant that's going to tailor my diet plan to me, that's going to tell me when I'm stressed, that's going to tell me when my blood pressure is high, that's going to take readings at a regular basis. All of these things are going to help, I think, bring what I would consider as more of a luxurious, developed world right and privilege to everyone around the world. And I think that's what, when we look at all of those pieces, I would say those top themes would be the most near term and impactful to our everyday.
Amazing. So can't let the conversation about Elon Musk just go. He, of course, is in the news constantly these days. I wasn't aware of that product that Elon Musk has done. But is this something that he obviously has worked with a medical institution to advance? Or tell us just a little bit about that, because that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, so it's one of the projects, and I don't know the exact specifics. You'll have to Google it, but if you Google Elon Musk brain implant, it'll come up. But he's definitely affiliated with it, and it's one of his many, ventures. He would obviously not be the one directly implanting this chip into this individual, but they had a rigorous volunteer, and it was a pilot that has been extremely successful. And that is going to be. I think we're going to be seeing more and more of that. By 2030, experts are predicting that our brains will be connected to the cloud. So that may look like a brain implant chip. That may look like, buds that you stick into your ear. And that certainly scares me. But I think from a purely, hey, if I can't move and I lost the use of my limbs, the fact that I can use a computer and even I can use it to speak, I can use it to navigate, I can use it to give myself personal autonomy, which I think is something that certainly people with disabilities can have challenges with.
For sure. And I guess, Cody, as we advance all of this, it becomes more and more affordable Because, for example, you think about somebody who's a paraplegic who has to wait in a certain spot to have transit come and pick them up. Hopefully there's no snowbanks that they have got to go through. So all of these elements that are in place, but they are barriers.
Absolutely.
So you then sort of look at somebody and say, you can have your own driverless vehicle, at your doorstep.
And we haven't even talked about robots, right? And cyborgs. That's the next big thing. And of course, I think of Terminator 2 when we talk cyborgs. But what I actually mean is there's AI systems that are in robotic forms that have helped people be able to actually use their legs again, because it actually makes the spine speak to the brain and allows you to walk freely. So in some cases, being a cyborg doesn't mean, taking your brain and implanting it into a robot necessarily, but it is having an artificial limb that you're able to actually control whether you can open and close the hand with your thoughts, or controlling a computer with your thoughts, and couple that with robots that can navigate the physical landscape, that can help, for example, elderly people, get up and sit down. We have autonomous vehicles that can now, you don't have to worry about parking because they can drop you off and drive themselves home. So there's all these things that are going to drastically change the world that we live in. And I think, as scary as that is in a lot of instances, we have to be prepared as humanity because this change is coming very quickly. So it's up to us to really lean in with these thought leaders, do as much work as we can in the spaces and places that we're in to educate ourselves and just understand kind of what's coming so we can be better prepared.
So, Cody, when you look at some of the conversations that are happening, as this is kind of rapidly advancing, one of the two things I guess I'd love to get your thoughts on specifically. One is regulation. How is it being regulated? And then just, the ethics portion of artificial intelligence.
Those are two major areas to unpack and extremely important. And I think regulation, all the governments around the world are grappling with this. I think we've seen a little more regulation in the EU than we have in North America. And at the same time, we're seeing a lack of regulation in other areas of the world. And there's this kind of speed up and slow down, right? And I think it was last year we saw some of the heads of the AI companies calling for a summer halt on AI because it's advancing too rapidly and too quickly. At the same time, there's this compounding fear that we also need to be the ones that are developing it first so that it doesn't get in the hands of our enemies. And we need to be ahead of things like the cyber terrorists and other. But regulation is going to be key. Regulation is going to also be key in making sure that we can manage our own privacy. And, that lends itself into a whole host of things, because we're now seeing example would be autonomous weapons, especially as it relates to on the borders of some of our countries that we're navigating. And folks that are migrating to these other countries and are on those borders and are fleeing their homelands, they are the subject and test subjects of a lot of these autonomous technologies and autonomous weapons that are not taking into consideration their rights. And so we need regulations that can protect all people and all humans. We also need regulations that steer AI in the right direction so that these AI systems are not prompted to teach someone how to build a bomb, that there's, guardrails in place that when you ask that question, it will not give you that information. So that would be kind of there's a lot to unpack there, and I've done probably a poor job of explaining it, but high level, those are some of the concerns. I would say ethically, we are on a very dangerous path in terms of controlling, manipulating, and protecting people's privacy. So we have a technology that has the ability, we've seen this through social media with the algorithms, to have an extremely heightened understanding of not only psychology, but your own makeup of what drives you, what enrages you, what makes you happy, what makes you fearful. So imagine having that technology and being able to deploy it en masse that is tailored for each individual. That is very challenging and scary. Then you look at some of the things that are happening in what we talked about, the brain chip. Apple AirPods, they have just done a patent that is investigating using your brain waves to read your thoughts, to use your thoughts to be able to control. So imagine the scariness when you can read somebody's thoughts, when you can read somebody's face and know their sexuality, know their political leaning, know their subconscious. I mean, these are huge ethical implications that are going to challenge the limits of our privacy, challenge the limits of our humanity. And at the same time, we have governments that are looking to advance in this space, and we have these major tech companies that do have a private sector interest that are also competing in this space. And so how do we make sure that we're holding these massive bodies accountable so that we're not exploiting our own privacy at the whim of everybody's free will?
Yeah, and I think the one challenge, Cody, with these conversations is that it is incumbent, I think, that government would be the ones to look at where the regulations come. The challenge, I think, in today's society is people view governments, different institutions, that they don't trust them. And they've earned that reputation. So now when you talk about trusting, who do we trust to ensure that this artificial intelligence does have some guardrails on it? I mean, where does that trust factor come? And again, I'm simply asking you because I know you're so immersed in this. And if you sort of said, we don't have an answer for that yet, I totally get that and I would totally respect that because there's so much happening. But I think when you start talking about things like trust, that starts to become another area where there's so much that can be gleaned from body language. Forget AI for a second. When you're talking to somebody,
Yes.
you can get a sense, man, this dude's not interested in anything I have to say, or this is a great conversation. It's animated. We can see how our body's moving. Artificial intelligence doesn't have that ability. That at least I don't believe it does, and maybe it does. I don't know. But that issue around trust, who do we trust to make sure that those guidelines or guardrails, I should say, are appropriately applied?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and one that, I think we're going to have to find out the answers to. I don't have all the answers, but I think it does start with a conversation. And what I've seen is the most that we can do as a human race is to get ahead of this by talking about it, by understanding what those risks are, and then raising those risks to the people that we hold accountable by voting them into office, by holding the companies accountable that are in this race to generative and artificial intelligence, right? Or AGI, as it's referred to. Artificial general intelligence is when AI is going to reach human level intelligence. It's incumbent on all of us to be having these conversations with the people in the spaces that we are in and the people that we trust. And so for me, it's diving into, folks like Dr. Joy Buolamwini, who's uncovering a lot of this stuff and bringing it to these heightened levels. It's working with, the Connor Grennans at NYU. It's following various different podcasts with these experts and journalists that are in this space all the time. So it's really trying to do the research to understand the people that you do trust, and then also who's in my sphere of influence and how can I share this information. And so for us, I want to make sure that our tourism industry in Manitoba is using this technology properly, right? When we look at things like reconciliation, I want to make sure that we're moving forward in reconciliation and not back, right? So we as Travel Manitoba have a role to play in helping to educate the industry, but also having a shape in how we can use this to advance reconciliation and to help, lessen the divide, but to make sure that our industry holds up that same, ethical mantra that we've piloted. So I can't solve everything today, and all I can do is continue to learn. But I think if all of us just looked at our sphere of influence and said, who can we talk about this with? Who can we unpack this with? What are some things that were keeping us up at night? That's really where the real change is going to happen.
So, Cody, you mentioned it, and I'm delighted you mentioned reconciliation because, this is a human rights podcast, and at some point we have to sort of go into that conversation. How would you see Chat GPT or artificial intelligence? I'm going to put those in the same umbrella. How would you see them advancing reconciliation in our society?
I think it's going to do a lot to advance reconciliation. I look at, first of all, the language and translation power that artificial intelligence has had. So we know there's many different Indigenous languages across Canada that are, not widely known to the general populace. So being able to add better translation, meaning behind that is going to strengthen that, but also storytelling. So yes, AI can be inherently biased and it can give incorrect information. it can also be a huge advocate for good. So, for example, Travel Manitoba has piloted its own LLM called Guide Geek. So it's a chat GPT for tourism for Manitoba specifically. And we worked with the folks at Guide Geek to make sure that we're providing the proper protocols, that we're providing the respectful language, that if you're talking about what are Indigenous experiences in tourism in Manitoba, that it's going to spit back authentic results. And it's also a safe space for people to ask questions to say, hey, I've never been to a powwow. Yeah, am I safe to go? What would that look like? And so it can provide that education piece in a safer space with someone that is providing them maybe the courage or the knowledge to reach out. It also is a really great unifier. So it can identify thought leaders in the space. And when we look at organizations like Indigenous IITC, Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, they are an amazing organization that's championing tourism for Canada in the Indigenous reconciliation area. So how are they leveraging artificial intelligence to help share their stories and share their voices? And so it's, we have a job to put data in as much as the data that's already out there on the internet.
So just go back to emails, texting. I mean, some of the things that everybody's been using and everybody's aware of. I remember one of the things when we were building and really sort of looking at the journey that people would have when they came into the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. We wanted it to be very technologically advanced. I mean, part of it was we didn't want to be artifact rich because we didn't want to have, objects that would come and go. We wanted to have the ability to, as human rights is very, very organic and moving, and there's lots of things that happen, we wanted to be very proactive in that regard. And so technology was really the foundation of how we wanted that to happen and that experience that we wanted people to get when they went into the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. But Cody, when you think about that experience, when you think about, as I said, just email and texting, the one thing we kept coming back to constantly was despite the ability and the advancement of technology, the best relationship is a conversation. How do you sort of see this advancement impacting that? Because conversation is really something that is still so human. And I just wonder how this advancement enhances that, or what is the risk, or how do we sort of manage that?
It's definitely going to have both risks and advantages. I think from a risk perspective, we've seen this already with just social media and even TikTok and the pandemic. People are feeling more isolated and lonely than they ever have before. And younger generations are no different. And as digital technology gets more hyper-personalized, what that means is everything becomes individualized. And why that might not seem like a big deal, that water cooler talk that we used to have about the finale of Lost or, the Grey Cup, those events are happening less and less, which means that people are not bonding over the same thing. So I think we have to really figure out, how do we maintain humanity within this behavioral shift as a society? And how do we make sure that those face-to-face conversations and meaningful connections are happening? I think on the positive side, you're looking at, again, the translation piece. I can now have a meaningful conversation with a colleague that doesn't speak my own language, that, would have been much more difficult previously. So barriers are being broken down. I'm also able to use artificial intelligence to help me learn in new ways and give me the confidence to go into new spaces. And also, I'm using artificial intelligence to become more human. So I think what artificial intelligence is good at, it's closing the gap between machine and human, which means that, in the future, I don't need to know how to build a website. I can just talk to AI normally and say, hey, I want to build a website or I want to do this. It'll build it for you. Whereas before you had to have all this coding knowledge. And so that gap is closing. And even down to, podcasts. Notebook LM, which is a new tool that Google piloted, is able to create generative podcasts using two large language model hosts, a male and a female host. And it's not meant to replace podcasts or human conversation, but it's meant to help people learn. So, for example, I get a new vacuum. I could load that manual up and hit generate podcast. It then does a podcast episode on how my vacuum works. So I can listen to it while I'm on the treadmill. Maybe it's a different way of learning. So I think hopefully what I'm imagining, and certainly what I'm trying to do, is use artificial intelligence to supercharge how I get my information. to free me up to have more meaningful interactions with people in the real world.
So when you look at the economics and people talk about, I'll just say the three classes, you have people that are, sort of on the poverty level, you have the middle class, then you have the ultimate rich people. The use of artificial intelligence, is it going to create more stratospheres of people who feel maybe they're just feeling less educated, people that are highly more educated, more academic? Do you sort of see those elements as being problematic as we continue down this journey of trying to really understand how we can benefit from artificial intelligence?
Oof, I mean, hugely so. First of all, what's the role of education, right? So are people going to be educating their kids just to be better citizens because the need for education no longer is needed when you've got artificial intelligence doing everything? That's a big fear of mine. And are we really learning anything if we just simply ask a question and get told exactly what it is in that moment? And we've seen this even with teachers now are struggling with essays and essays being written by ChatGPT. And so how do we balance teaching kids how to use valuable tools, because we all know how to use spreadsheets to do calculations for us, but we still learn fundamentals of math, right? So I think that's a huge challenge. And then we have the class divide, which is just a global worldwide phenomenon, where is it going to be that the few companies at the very, very top hold all of the world's wealth, and that the rest of us are kind of missing out, and the disenfranchised become more disenfranchised? And even, and this was where I was a bit concerned, is some of these leaders in the space were speaking at TED about this utopian future where we don't need to work anymore. And they talked about, well, we'll have universal basic income. And, the thing is, I appreciate looking at a future, but people need purpose. We all need a purpose on this planet. And that's what feeds our value and our happiness. And so if we don't need to work, then how do we transcend that sense of purpose into our everyday lives? And how do we make sure that people can learn how to do that? Because otherwise, we're going to have a population of very bored, disenfranchised people. So that's very scary. That definitely keeps me up at night. And of course, the displacement of jobs. I mean, AI is absolutely going to displace and disrupt jobs. And so, my goal also in self-serving is I want to stay employed. I love working. I love my job. So I'm going to do everything I can to learn about artificial intelligence so I can be better at my job and better at upskilling other people. But we're gonna have to navigate that. And right now, we don't know. I can't even predict where we're going to be at in 2 years. When I look at 2 years ago to today, I mean, we're talking about what our website is going to look like in 2 years and if we even will need one. Those are huge conversations that have not happened since the invention of the iPhone, right? So, I mean, these are major consumer behavioral shifts that we're all grappling with in the world. And, leaders are talking about it. And so I don't have the answer for that. I think that there are some major, major concerns and questions we have to answer. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to hold those tech leaders accountable and do not let them gloss over it. These are huge implications that affect the entire globe.
There's been so much that you have uncovered and so many great examples that you've been given. So thank you for that. I think it's really helpful when people are trying to navigate something that, I mean, they're trying to learn, but examples are such a great way to learn, at least from my perspective. I think it's a great way to learn. In the conferences that you've been at, I know you talked about healthcare being one of the areas that has been conversationalized, which is great. Has there been any sort of socialization, Cody, that you're aware of, that the topic of human rights is starting to find its way into some of these bigger conferences where people are getting together and maybe there's a specific workshop in various areas? Are you aware of that element starting to become more part of that AI or ChatGPT conversation?
Yeah, I think in all the conferences that I'm at, there's kind of common themes that are related to human rights. So things like security, things like privacy, and also things like automation. And so when we look at those key themes, you want to make sure that you're not putting your private information out there that's at risk. So first party data and how are you, certainly in the marketing space, how do we manipulate and use data? But from a technology standpoint, what are these tech companies doing with all of our data that they're learning on, right? And governments, right? And all the facial recognition software that's out there. So that's one. I think, security and protocols, making sure that you have a policy in place as an organization because your employees are using it. So don't put your organization at risk. Make sure that people know how to use it properly. And also making sure that we're using it ethically. So when that automation piece comes in, what are you doing in automation? If you're using, for example, software and AI to screen resumes for hiring, well, those have been proven to show a lot of bias. So you want to be very careful about that. So we're talking about these implications and how to make sure that we're using it responsibly. I think there are much more severe implications being discussed in other events. I mean, I'm mostly at marketing related conferences, but tech conferences, certainly when you're looking at automatic weapons, facial recognition software, any sort of large governmental security pieces, I would say that's where those conversations are probably happening in a more fulsome setting.
Yeah, I can see that there's so much to unpack here. But Cody, I just want to thank you for allowing me to kind of jump into your schedule to have this conversation, this podcast. As always, for me, the beauty of this is I learn something every time I talk to somebody, and this has been no different. I've learned a tremendous amount from you. You have a great feel for this. We're very fortunate to have you in Winnipeg and in Manitoba, and Travel Manitoba as an organization is fortunate to have you with what it is that you do and how you see the world. Cody, last word to you. Is there a question that I didn't ask you that you sort of say, I wish, there's just one thing that I'd love to leave your listeners with, which is the following?
I think the biggest takeaway is don't be scared of it, because the fear is going to prevent you from unlocking the full potential. Try to take time to play around. There is no user manual for ChatGPT. So I would say first and foremost, go to Connor Grennan's website and download the Quick Start Guide and just play around with it. Have some fun. We as a society are no longer at 0% when we're starting something. We're at 70%. It can transform it, but it's about changing our behaviors. It's an HR issue, and we're the issue, right? We need to change our behaviors. Just like when you walk into a room, you flick on the light switch, you didn't think about that because you've always done it. That's what AI is going to do to our behaviors and our everyday mindset. So if we can get into that mindset and start to unlock the potential, you will find so many surprising ways that it can help benefit your life and be a real value to you. So as much as there's a lot of scariness around there, I would say just have some fun and play around with it.
Couldn't end it any better than that. Cody Chomiak, thank you so very much for your time. Continued success in all you do.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a joy to be here.
Thanks for listening to Humans on Rights. A transcript of this episode is available by clicking the link in the show notes of this episode. Humans on Rights is recorded and hosted by Stuart Murray. Social media marketing by Buffy Davey. Music by Doug Edmond. For more, go to humanrightshub.ca.
Produced and distributed by the Sound Off Media Company.